Hello, and welcome to the Digital Workplace Strategy Summit presented by Catapult Systems. My name is Rick Shepard, and I'm a security coach and consultant here at Catapult. The topic of this briefing is implementing regulatory digital compliance standards for your organization. Today, we will cover what regulatory digital compliance is, some of the available standards and frameworks, what drives the need for compliance, a couple of recommendations for compliance, and how compliance fits in the overall Catapult maturity model. Starting out, what is compliance? Compliance is simply adhering to one or more frameworks or standards to assist in protecting your data and systems. A non-digital compliance equivalent is, let's say, following OSHA rules and policies for a safer workplace. Following compliance frameworks and guidelines are making your data and your systems safer. Some of these frameworks are very targeted, usually to a specific operation. Others may be very broad and will encompass the entire IT landscape. Compliance gives you a method for reducing your overall IT risk footprint through controls and guidance. So here are some of the over 700 frameworks that you may have heard about. Going through the list, FISMA being the federal government, HIPAA for healthcare, GDPR. If you're doing business within the EU. So now that we've seen and we know what a compliance standard is, what are some of the drivers? What are the needs? What drives us for the need to come for compliance? So first of all, legal reasons. Your industry may be governed by laws that mandate compliance, whether it be state, federal, international laws, regulations, etc. Moving on, compliance may be written into contracts that your business has entered into. Here lately, a lot of cybersecurity insurance providers are mandating compliance as a part of their willingness to provide coverage, or they may use compliance to adjust the premiums. Now, with these two categories here, they're pretty cut and dry. The the guidelines and obligations that you have there for compliance will be spelled out either in the laws or the contracts that you sign. Now, the third one, the self-identified, that's typically a business decision. If you're not obligated by a law, contract, what have you, to be obligated for a compliance framework, you can choose to follow a framework or a standard on your own. And even if you are obligated via legal or contractual reasons, you still may choose to follow a framework or standard you in addition to the legal or contractual obligations that you have. Completely your choice. As we dig deep into the legal section, the compliance and standards are usually the most well known. Even if a company isn't mandated to follow them, you've probably heard about most of the ones on the screen. HIPAA has been in the news lately. CCPA has just come around in the last few years. So these are fairly well known. Again, they're spelled out in the laws and regulations. And typically, if you are beholden to them, you already know that you're obligated to follow these. From a contractual side, any of the over 700 frameworks or standards can be included into a contract that you sign, whether it be with an insurance provider or a third party provider that you're doing business with. This again will be spelled out and typically agreed to during the contract signing. The most common frameworks that I've seen in this category are the four on the screen: the NIST framework, CIS framework, ISO framework, and also the high trust. Again, this will be spelled out, should be no surprise. Once we get into the self-identified, it gets very interesting. Again, The entire list of over 700 compliance frameworks and standards are there for you to choose from. You can choose one, you can choose many. The choice is entirely up to you. Some companies choose the framework they are most familiar with. Some choose based off of proposed plans for future acquisitions that may be subject to legal or contractual obligations. Uh, The reasons that you choose a regulatory compliance for your business under self-identified is as many as there are businesses. This leads me to the two questions I get all the time. What framework is best for my business? What should I choose for my business? And what do you recommend? The first question really depends on many factors. What industry do you operate in? What framework aligns with your business model? What are your future plans? Where do you operate business? And many, many more. It's typically a long conversation, but usually you can tailor or determine what framework best fits your company with those conversations. Now, if you are not legally obligated, contractually obligated, and just want to follow a framework, I actually have two that I recommend. One is the NIST 800-53. The other is the ISO IEC 27001. Both of these are completely agnostic. They're internationally recognized frameworks. You can be a restaurant, you can be a construction company. They both fit your company. There are also frameworks that a number of other frameworks are based on. For example, FINRA, HIPAA are both based off the 853 series. GDPR and many others are based off of the ISO 27001. So if you know you're may go into GDPR later down the road in your compliance journey, you may want to start with the ISO 27001. If you are looking at HIPAA down the road, you may want to start with the NIST 853. And even if you start with the NIST 853 and decide to go into GDPR later, there are many resources that provide the mapping of controls from, let's say, the NIST 853 to GDPR. So it makes that transition so much easier. And vice versa, there's mappings and resources for the ISO 27001 to HIPAA, FINRA, etc. So as we move on to the digital workplace maturity model, this is a maturity model created by Catapult. There are 9 different tiers covering a wide range of items within the IT landscape. Regulatory digital compliance falls in the security tier. In the first 2 levels of the security tier highlighted here, there are no defined company-wide frameworks or standards identified. No compliance, the compliance work is mostly ad hoc, and in the low level, you may have different areas, different teams following different standards or frameworks in their specialized areas, but no widespread adoption of a compliance standard. In the mid-level, a standard or framework is identified and documented. This is also where documentation surrounding the chosen compliance is documented. So if you're going to follow HIPAA, you have HIPAA defined as your company-wide policy and compliance standard, and your documentation is starting to reflect that. Once you get into the high level, you start having the C-suite buy-in, and then the Excel level, the compliance is fully integrated into the business and continuous improvement is realized through analysis. So very quick run through the maturity model. Most people will start around the mid tier as soon as you identify your compliance standard that you wish to follow or obligated to follow, as the case may be. Start your documentation, you're in the mid tier. Now I go back to this slide as as you start your compliance journey, you will very quickly find out that no matter what the framework or standards you follow, it will pretty much touch every tier in the maturity model you see. There will be controls that influence digital employee experience all the way over to analytics. While compliance falls into the security tier, think of it as an umbrella over all the tiers. There are controls that guide MFA, DLP, some of the other acronyms or briefings that you will sit today have a compliance will have a touch into them and influence those. So today I've gone over what a regulatory digital compliance is, or what regulatory digital compliance is, some of the standards and frameworks, what the drivers are, the legal, contractual, and self-identified, some of the recommendations that we would make, and how it fits within the overall maturity model. If you have any questions or would like to assist for us to assist you on your compliance journey, please use the QR code on the left. If you would like to provide feedback, please use the QR code on the right. We greatly value your feedback. Thank you for your time today and have a great rest of your day.